What's up, friendly neighborhood nerds? Thank you for watching our video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and ring that bell.
Power, faster than a speeding bullet.
I'm Marjorie Liu, and I freaking love comics.
Hello, I'm Chris Claremont, and I freaking love freaking comics. You got a problem with that?
Yo, my name is Donnie Cates, and I know the brand is I freaking love comics, but I fucking love comics.
Comics, movies, TV, video games, anime, your powers combined. I freaking love comics.
Live with Giga and Roland.
Hello, IFLC. This is Judah Rad, and I'm here with Robo and Ree, and today we have a very, very special guest. And we've known each other for about 30 seconds now, so I think it's safe to say that we're best friends. He's written for Boom,
Ride or Die.
Vault, yeah, Valiant, Lionforge, and now Marvel. He has a PhD in literature. He's worked in digital marketing. He's Alex Paknadel, and he's on our show. How's it going today, Alex? Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me. A little bit of applause there. Appreciate it. Thanks. I don't know. That was a really lovely intro, but it's going to be a huge letdown now.
No, not at all.
I mean, don't talk to me about marketing. I can't sell shit.
Well, we're really excited to have you here, and
Thank you very much.
we have a bunch of questions, and we're going to ask you all of them. So,
Okay, I'm going to be judging your bookshelf behind you just as you talk. By the way, just so you know.
Oh yeah, by all means.
It's pretty
By
great.
all means.
Oh. Fathom.
I do like Fathom. I'm a fan. R.I.P. Michael Turner. So, we're going to start talking about Empire. We're very excited about it, and you are writing a one-shot as kind of a tie-in. 2 one-shots, that's right. 2 one-shots as tie-ins for Empire, which is the big upcoming Marvel event. So, my first question is about Celestial Messiah, which just the name is very exciting to me because it makes me think of Celestial Madonna, which is the classic Avengers arc. My assumption is that this story you're writing is going to star Mantis. My question, as probably the biggest Silver Surfer fan in the world, is will she by chance be revisiting her brief romance with Norrin Rad?
I'm not going to answer that question with a question.
Okay.
Here's what I can say. I can't answer that directly. I think I've addressed everything. Now, when I got the gig, I'm quite research intensive. So I went and read all of it. And I mean all of it. Including, there's a Marvel fanfare episode that was kind of retconned into an alternate reality and stuff. So I read that, and I kind of folded that in as subtly as I could. It's exhaustive. So, I mean, I would expect to see furtive nods and winks to most of the stuff that you want to be seeing. How's that?
Okay.
Nice.
I like that.
Man,
I
foiled the shit out of that.
It's a minefield out here.
That was a masterpiece. I'm out.
Yeah. See, now I'm curious, what should people be following and paying attention to leading up to Empire?
Okay, well, there are the one-shots, obviously. I think you've already had a couple of those. I think there was a really awesome one. I think Robbie Thompson just did one. I read that. That was pretty good. It's very good. Sorry, it's Robbie. I think the big thing really is did you guys read Incoming? Okay. Yeah, Incoming.
Intro.
Yeah. So I mean that's the big one. I think that's
Okay.
where all the sort of pieces were set in motion. And I think if you if you look at the sort of writers who are involved, that'll give you a fairly sort of good indication of where things are going to be tending. I mean, it's been weird because of the lockdown. We're obviously kind of off schedule and everything, so there should have been more of it out than there is. So I think a lot of it's going to be sort of backloaded to an extent. So I think you've got a sort of shorter runway than you normally would have. You know what I mean?
Understand.
Or a shorter on ramp, you know.
Okay. You kind of answered my next question already, which is about whether you reread classics such as the Kree Skrull War and Celestial Madonna. Is this just based on what I've read about the subject matter so far? It seems like it's like almost like the third in a trilogy that starts with the Kree Skrull War and then has Secret Invasion and then goes to this story arc. Would you say that's accurate, or?
No.
Ooh, okay.
No, I wouldn't, because they're
another minefield.
It's not like it's a culmination, right? I'm not saying it's like it's not like it's the top of the pyramid, but I would say it's more. It alludes to and involves sort of cosmic Marvel, like en bloc, right? So, so the storylines that you mentioned are absolutely involved. They're absolutely integral to the plot in some respects, but certainly not overwhelmingly. I would say. Yeah, just look at Cosmic Marvel and consider it as a kind of edifice, and there'll be components from kind of everything. It's very sort of syncretic, and I think that's why it's sort of so exciting. You know what I mean?
Sure,
it is exciting.
That's awesome. So a few months ago, we had the pleasure of. There was this Comic-Con here. We had a couple of drinks with Donnie Cates. I'm sure you've heard of him, right? And one of the things that he likes to talk about is like how things are at the pitch meetings and how kind of crazy people get with trying to get their ideas out there. With an event like Empire, which I'm sure tons of people are bringing their heads together, like, could you like give us a peek inside what a sort of collaboration meeting is like, or a pitch meeting for something like that, as you guys are bringing all your guys' big brains together?
Galaxy
I can't, because honestly, I mean, I wasn't present for any of the meetings physically.
Okay.
I mean, the way this happened. I mean, this is the first work I've done for Marvel. Hopefully, not the last. But what happened was I was actually approached by Al Ewing, because this is Al and Dan's baby, and I've known Al for a while, and he's taken an interest in the work of my studio, White Noise, that I'm in with Ram V, Dan Waters, and Rhino Sullivan and Casper Wingard, and it was weird, man. Like Darren Shan, the editor I'm working with, had sent me an email, and it had gone through to my junk, right? It had gone through to my Gmail junk file for some reason. I mean, it's insane. And I just got this. I got this follow up, and it was Darren's email address at Marvel. And it went, just. Hey, this is Darren again from Marvel. Just wondering if you got my email. And oh God, that kind of that awful flop sweat of just like, oh no, oh no, it happened and I missed it. No. Jesus.
Yes.
It was that, man. It was, oh God, it was excruciating. And then but luckily, he was cool about it, and I just went, look, I'm sorry, I missed a step because this went into my junk folder for a couple of days. But he was fine about it. But so it was really, when at the point when Al and Dan were laying the groundwork for it, they invited me. So I handled kind of everything remotely. So I just got on a call. I got on a call with Al and he sort of told me the sort of parameters of sort of what he wanted. And then like it was just gave me sort of free reign, really. But yeah, I mean, in terms of sort of actually sitting in, I mean, I have been in writers' rooms. I was in a Lion Forge writers' room in St. Louis, and that was that was last year, and that was pretty intense. But my understanding is that the Marvel ones are they're not. This is just my understanding, from what I've heard. Because I mean, sure. I've never been in the room, but I know a lot of people who are in the room. Is that they're very kind of collegiate. It's not. Everyone wants to kind of get their idea across, but from what I understand, it's additive. So people are pitching constantly. And then, someone on the other side of the table will go, oh, and you could do this. So it's not, you have this sort of, there's this sort of misapprehension, I think. Because I mean, I was even like, I've not to participate, but I've sat in a couple of TV ones as well. And they're really not kind of combative. They're not, I mean, some of them are, I'm sure, but the ones I've been privy to certainly haven't been sort of, combative spaces. It's all very kind of collaborative.
That's interesting because when I think of creators, it sounds healthier. It runs contrary to my perception because, like, when I think of creators and creative types, I feel like everybody has everyone. I mean, I feel like it's got to be an ego-driven enterprise to some extent. So it's surprising to me that the trend is that people work together well. So that's good. I like it.
But I think a lot of that, though, you're also in a room with people who aren't cowed by that.
Right.
You're in a room full of people who, and this isn't an ego thing. I think it's an honest appraisal of one's abilities, right? Like if you're in a Marvel writers' room, you can pretty much take it as given that you deserve to be there. And accordingly, like, why should you be shy? Like what, why should you be, why should you feel the need to be aggressive?
Right.
Everyone's there.
Yeah.
That's right.
Everyone's there to do a job. Everyone's there to help you. I'm not even the fly on the wall, so I don't know. But just from what I've heard, it's a very kind of, it's not like I don't know whether it's like a nurturing space. I don't know whether someone brings donuts. I hope they do. But yeah, from what I understand, it's a very kind of constructive thing. It's not. No one's bringing a kind of chainsaw to
Okay.
sort of cut down.
That's exactly how we define nurturing rooms at IFLC: is how many donuts.
Right.
Clearly.
And also like what donuts people bring, right? Like someone brings you a Jaffa Cake donut, like
Fire.
That's love.
That's true.
I don't know what that is, so I picked one, and apparently it's a good donut.
How do you guys feel about bear claws?
Oh, no, that's great.
I love a good bear claw.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you're speaking my language. What was the first one you said? What was that?
Jaffa Cake.
That's like orange chocolate. It's so good.
Oh, it sounds delicious.
People always not had that. It's amazing.
It's like
I don't think
like
so.
orange Jello, with a sort of mottled chocolate top, and like normally they're like these like almost cookies. But there's a donut variant that is like literally 2,000 calories.
Oh, nice.
And therefore awesome.
I'm surprised you guys didn't just call it the American.
We wrap things in bacon. That's kind of
that's true. That's true.
That's our place on the world stage.
What sweet bacon? I think is your place on the world stage. Like sweet, because like everywhere else, like no, bacon's a savory thing, and like that's sacred. And you guys are like, no, I'm gonna mix it up.
Well, there's only one kind of bacon.
Bacon.
What you're talking about is ham. You guys are talking about ham. We're not talking about. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh no! It begins.
I've tried the British bacon, and I disagree. I disagree with it, but.
Is an international incident kicking off? Is that what's happening?
I think so. So it's funny. Let me give a quick shout out to actually the guy that connected us with you. You were going back and forth with him at Twitter. But one of the other administrators on our Facebook group, his name is Michael Malone, and he's from Liverpool, and we do this all day. And I think that the difference between bacon versus bacon has to come up at least once a week. So
Bacon wars.
It's a contentious issue, yeah.
So to close up Empire, to close up Empire, I know you already said that there's a lot you can't say. But before we move on to the next topic, just for those too lazy to Google it for themselves, if you want to give like 1 or 2 sentences, the premise, the public premise of what is this about, so that people can go and like what's going on in Empire coming up, the public version. Yeah, sure.
Okay.
We can see the Google. We can see the Google in your glasses, by the way. What is Empire about now?
The premise will have the Avengers and Fantastic Four coming together to prepare for an upcoming alien invasion.
PhD in literature, everyone. PhD in literature.
Right. Well, you heard it here first, guys.
You heard it here first. It's on Google, but here first. But I appreciate that.
Okay, so it's a Fantastic Four Avengers led event, possibly with other players, and it concerns an imminent Kree Skrull invasion of Earth, and that is what I have to say about that.
Nice.
Put your toy
And the
away.
Silver Surfer's definitely going to be there.
Us three here have real jobs that we do outside of this. The 2 boys here are in the Air Force, and I do data analysis.
Thank you for your service.
Yes,
Thank you.
Thank you.
So I work in digital marketing as well, and Arcadia and Friendo both seem to be pretty heavily inspired by your time in digital marketing. Is that a safe assumption?
Very safe, yeah.
Yeah. Are there any ideas from that other life that you had that you still want to write about and explore that you haven't explored yet?
Yeah. I mean, it was very fertile soil. I mean,
Some shady shit.
no, it's a funny thing. Look, like I'm not genuinely. I'm not saying that I was kind of ahead of the curve. May I ask when did you start?
I started at News Corp about 7 years ago, and then I did 5
Right.
years with them and 2 years out in the wild.
Right. Because it seemed it was interesting because I mean I remember around about the time that I kind of got into it, the big thing was it was very kind of utopian even then.
Yep.
And people were kind of talking about folksonomies, right? So this idea that you're just going to be able to kind of crowdsource everything, and I remember sort of like sitting in on training seminars where people were talking about the wisdom of crowds, and how this is going to kind of democratize everything, and just having this weird sort of sense of unease that I couldn't quite put my finger on. And then I watched an Adam Curtis documentary called All Watched Over by Machines of Loving Grace.
Ooh, that sounds terrifying.
No, it's a Richard Brautigan quote, but it's great, by the way. I mean, Adam Curtis is fantastic. I mean, they're definitely they're polemics. They're not. You can't say they're objective, right? But I mean, they're not like Michael Moore. It's not that kind of tendentious.
Bias.
I mean, but he certainly has a position and he has a narrative, right? But in this series, and it's about 10 years old now, but it absolutely kind of concretized why I was feeling uneasy. and it's the whole thing is about the origins of cyber utopianism, like basically in the sort of 60s counterculture, and how that then fed into, because a lot of the kind of Haight-Ashbury hippies went on to become like hedge fund managers.
CEOs,
yeah.
Right.
And they imported that kind of utopianism, and now we're seeing it sort of absolutely running amok, in Silicon Valley, and these people who are good at coding and now think that they're really good at coding people.
Yeah.
And that's why we're now in a world of shit. Well, billionaires are a bad idea, man.
Yeah.
Just in general, I think if a country has a billionaire, I mean, I know this is a very militant position, but I was saying this to my wife the other day, like, a couple of years ago, like Britain had this thing of, we have like 700 billionaires. Like, that's a symptom of illness. Like, the more billionaires you have, like that's a sign of like.
You have to be a sociopath, to be a billionaire. I think. Yeah.
If anyone can't afford their basic needs, then the country shouldn't have a single billionaire until it.
You get to 999 million, you get a dog park named after you, you won capitalism, you get a little certificate.
I wish I could quote him because I'm not stealing the quote, but there was somebody on Twitter I saw that was like, every billionaire is an example of a policy failure. Every single one is that's 100%. One notch for it, and I was like, man, that's so true.
Love it. And like by the way, like I'm not saying that. Sorry, this is a terrible digression, and I will kind of pull it back. But like, I'm not saying that from like a position of like militant Marxism or anything. Like, I'm a fairly kind of unreconstructed capitalist. You know what I mean? I just think that regulate it.
Yeah.
Just
right.
That's it. Like, just regulate it. You know.
Don't want people to starve.
Yeah. Like it's not. I mean, I suppose it is rocket science now, but. Pulling it back would be, but this documentary series I was talking about, it's interesting because they go into that sort of wisdom of crowds thing, and it was the example that they use is this game of Pong, that was used to kind of prove the wisdom of crowds theory, which is that basically they gave a load of experimental participants in this room these controllers, and assigned one of them to one team and another to another, and it's just the Pong game, right? Mm-hmm. And they all synchronized, and so they were playing this game together. And right, well, there's the proof, right? So crowds, individuals are stupid, but if you get a crowd together, you get an almost kind of gestalt phenomenon. But then, like, a load of behavioral psychologists went away and sort of actually tested the hypothesis and said, okay, to a point.
Mm-hmm.
But beyond a certain threshold, it gets dumber.
That's right. Groupthink is not inherently magnanimous,
How do they define that threshold?
But it really did. And I kind of walked away from that thinking, oh right, okay, so this is actually a recipe for populism.
Mm-hmm.
But that thing that we were doing, with the kind of, because I remember almost the moment where like micro-targeting kind of came in. It was really interesting. I was doing a bit of work on kind of Facebook at the time, and it was just after they'd had their IPO, and they were really kind of struggling to find a viable business model. I remember afterwards, it was like they were doing like mirrored audiences and stuff like that, and it was a really and they were on this kind of buying spree where they were buying up all these other platforms, and it was just really, at the time. I mean, I wish I'd kind of recognized it for what it was, but just, that they were kind of using algorithms to make their platform artificially smaller. Yeah. Because at the time, they hadn't found a way at that point, I think it's like 2011 or something, they hadn't found a way to kind of hyper-personalize it, and they were losing users at a rate of knots. And then they started leaning into algorithms, and then all of a sudden, everyone's kind of looking into a highly polished surface. They're not really seeing anything that they don't already think, and the whole thing just becomes this kind of amplifier for kind of confirmation bias. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards, like, you look at sort of what sort of happened sort of politically, and I mean, I'm sure, given your background, this is something that's kind of occurred to you before, but it just hit me one day. I was like, oh my god, like, this is fascism as the sales funnel. It's the sales funnel applied to fascism. It's like
100%.
or you know, it's you know, the product that you want people to buy is like right wing politics.
Yep.
And you step by step you take them through the purchase funnel, and like it's. But people are kind of, you know, people are buying it in the same way that they buy sneakers. You know, it's a consumer
absolutely.
choice.
I mean, you see that with that whole Russian interference and how they just seeded dissent through those echo chambers. It was the same thing that's happening with the protesting to open states, all that kind of stuff. I don't know if you saw, there was some stuff on Reddit around that. Some guy did some research and he figured out the ones that have said, so there's all these different IPs, all these different websites that have been set up for different states saying open Minnesota, open whatever, all set up by the same IP address. So it's something that the Trump administration copies from Russia, and we see like huge administrations doing it over and over again. It's terrifying. You know, it works.
Yeah.
It 100% works.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Our industry.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly.
Thanks, guys.
It gives me nightmares.
Appreciate it.
Hey, you're welcome.
Hey, Alex, you taught me a new word when I was reading Arcadia, and
Same.
I love it. It's fascinating. And correct me if I'm pronouncing this wrong. Skeuomorphism is definitely my favorite word of the week, because it's like it's the idea. I know what it means, but I still don't really have I can't even explain it clearly enough. But it's when something from like the real world is almost reproduced digitally for comfort, almost to like ease that transition into a new
Can I give an example?
technological.
Like when you're dragging items to the recycle bin, for example, that's like something you do in reality. That's on your desktop. You're seeing it go into the bin as trash.
It's cool because it's something I never really put much thought into, but obviously, you know, it's everywhere. Kind of
like the page turn on a digital book.
Yeah,
That's it.
that's
yeah.
the example.
Yeah,
that's the example that the student gives in Arcadia.
Yeah.
And the question I have is, so that level, that like you do a lot of research for these, but like when you're writing these stories, there's a lot of research that goes into them. Kind of reminds me of Michael Crichton, who I read a lot of back in like, I guess the 90s. He used to be one of my
man. Thank you so much.
One of my favorite writers. Is he one of your influences? And if so, or if not, who are your influences? Your literary influences?
I mean, I've read Crichton, and I think a lot of the time, I mean, like a lot of this stuff's in the groundwater, right? So you know, you can say such and such is such and such is an influence. I always make these things far more long-winded than they need to be. Sorry, but not explicitly. I mean, I would say, I mean, my influences. I mean, J.G. Ballard, front and center. I did my PhD on the guy. So yeah, huge influence. Philip K. Dick.
Yes, I can see that.
I mean, although I some of his views I know could be problematic, but Thomas Dish. I mean, comics-wise, I suppose Grant Morrison.
Very nice.
And Nocenti. Brubaker and Phillips. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's funny. I mean, such a lot kind of goes into the pot. I mean, I'm not saying I'm like the best read person or anything, but it's interesting sort of going back and sort of looking at your work sort of 3-4 years down the line and being able to kind of make those connections.
That's right.
You know, where you previously might not have seen it because, you know, you're right in the middle of the kind of process, you know. Yeah.
I like the way you put that.
I'd say Ballard.
I like the way you put that. You said like it's in the groundwater, and when we were talking about like the writer's voice and what does the writer think and what was he trying to express, and we talk about how like, well, just tell me sometimes. Like when we get the opportunity to interview a writer, we're like, just tell me, and then sometimes the writer's like, oh, you tell me, and then sometimes you give a guess and the writer's like, yeah, because you kind of pick something out that was there inherently, but maybe not consciously.
It's a funny thing though, because like, Alan Moore talks about this, like idea space, right? Where, you need to get your ideas down as quickly as possible because, they're somehow in the kind of collective unconscious and, you want to kind of snatch them as they kind of go by. I suppose I sort of subscribe to an almost to more sort of secular view of that. I had this thing a while ago where I would get on the phone with other writers and, we would kind of share pitches. And it was almost, it felt like, that kind of, there's that phenomenon of, bonobo chimpanzees on opposite sides of a river that have had no contact, suddenly learning how to make flint tools at the same time. Where, I'd speak to these writers and, oh, yeah, so like I've had this idea about blah. And, oh, yeah, no, I had that idea as well. Oh, shit, well, like, who's going to do it then? And it really kind of bothered me. But then you realize, again, it's an echo chamber effect, right? So, like, we're all consuming the same news, generally watching the same sort of TV shows, right? Possibly reading the same books. So, you have the same input. So how can you reasonably expect not to have a kind of broadly similar output? If those concerns, it's inevitable, right? So there comes a point. It's where I think you have to be not to put too fine a point on it, like culturally omnivorous, right? So like, anyone, not that a lot of people ask me, but if anyone asks me, how, what do you want to do? How to sort of be a good comic writer. Not that I'm saying I necessarily am, but I remember the advice that Warren Ellis gave in his kind of Come In Alone column was read Dickens, right? Don't gorge on comics. Absolutely study the form. Absolutely study the format. But in terms of inspiration, life is number one. But I mean that's not really an option right now. But look outside the medium, because that's when you bring interesting things back. If you sort of think of yourself as a Marco Polo, that you go into other forms. I mean, I'll give you an example, and this is an artistic example. But I was talking to. I hope he doesn't mind me saying this, but I'll say it. But I was talking to Trav Moore about Silver Surfer Black, and
so good.
Yeah. Oh, beautiful. I mean, just an incredible team, right? I mean, just what a super group of creators.
Right.
But he was saying that he was working. I hope I'm getting this right, but he said that he was getting an obsession with Rodin out of his system.
From Godzilla?
No. But those kind of tortured figures that Rodin has, right? But he said that he was just working those out. And that to me is that's how interesting things happen in comics, right? Is when people kind of go, look outside the medium and then import something. I mean, that was really that was Bendis's big innovation, right? That was Bendis's kind of big innovation, like in the late 90s, was kind of, he brought that kind of David Mamet naturalistic dialogue into comics for the first time. So finally you could have that kind of meta commentary on
yes,
that is... you could have that thing of like Spider-Man and Iron Man going, that's bit of the movies lately, which you hadn't had before. It was always like, I'm gonna go and do this thing,
It made it more personable, yeah.
Exactly.
When you mentioned Warren Ellis, I actually made that comparison when I was reading Arcadia, because he to me is really strong dialogue, and Arcadia is just really strong dialogue. And again, if anyone hasn't read it, you should, because it is it's like a team that's firing on all cylinders. Like, the art is amazing and out of this world. The concept is really cool. The writing is awesome. The dialogue is super strong. Characters are great. If you haven't read it, you need to read it.
Yeah, it's actually funny. We typically go back and we'll read things that we haven't read, especially when the creator writes back and says they'll be on our show. So then we scramble to read stuff, and your book came at a perfect time because we like to have these existential sort of questions, and we'll sit there and sometimes they even become kind of heated arguments when it gets too deep into philosophy but your book Arcadia like taps into definitely one we've had recently, and is what makes you, like, you know, and we get into like Star Trek teleportation versus others teleportation. So in Star Trek you break down into different molecules, which clearly you're not alive, and you're re-put back together. Are you the same person? We start asking these kind of questions. So for you, in the book, since you're the creator, would you say that the people, spoiler, so if you haven't read it, go read it, skip ahead about 10 minutes or so. But spoiler alert, the people who have died from this plague and are now uploaded into Arcadia, do those people have personhood? Are they people?
Digitized consciousness.
Yeah. Okay, we'll get. I won't get into the long grass on this, but I don't necessarily believe in personhood. I believe in dignity. I don't think, human rights to me is not a contentious issue. Like, I believe in the dignity of the individual and the ontological dignity of the individual. But I think personhood to me is a performance. I think it's not something that I think that has to be earned, but it's that whole thing of like, if something gives the appearance of consciousness, then there's no functional distinction, right, between the appearance of consciousness and consciousness. I mean, you could argue that. You could argue that. I mean, okay, let's get Cartesian.
Yes.
So, so the cogito, right? The Cartesian cogito. I think, therefore I am. Well, that's not true, is it? You think. There is metacognition, right? So all you can actually infer from that reliably is that thought exists.
Yes.
There is no I in thought. So, God, I even adjusted my glasses like an asshole.
It's perfect.
Actually,
I'll take a drink. I'll take a smug gulp as well.
Yeah.
Well.
But I it's a big claim to say that you're conscious. I think. I mean, I'm not a big one for kind of abstracting reality until it hangs by a thread. If anything, I'm more on the order of like retreating into this kind of comfortable knock on wood. This is what I can see and touch. Yes, I know that's a kind of complex complex interaction between sort of electromagnetic fields, but let's just assume that there's a solid object under my hand, right? Because you can only address the world that's in front of you, right? So I proceed from the assumption that, I'm talking to someone right now, and you're proceeding from the assumption that you're talking to someone. We don't know, but I suppose it's a question for me. It's an interesting kind of debate to have, over an espresso at Cafe Floor, on the left bank. But in terms of sort of By the way, those are really, really important debates to have, but like,
doesn't necessarily apply to real life.
Well, I think it's safer and more humane to assume wherever there's a question of personhood in general. I think you're in really dangerous waters. How's that?
Black Mirror kind of touches on this a little bit too. I don't know if you're familiar with the shows, but there's one episode where, I'll just ruin one of them for you if you haven't. Where someone's downloaded into like a snow globe kind of deal, and at the end of the episode, you find out that it's been a gift to somebody. But the whole episode, she's tortured. She doesn't know where she's at, what's going on here. And just the same in Arcadia, somebody's actual consciousness has been downloaded into this toy, and the person in it is completely traumatized by it. And so...
Is that the Miley Cyrus one?
No. But that is a good one also. This one is in season 1, and she's in you find out at the end she's in a snow globe. And then you kind of like, it makes you question, like, okay, now do you still feel bad if you realize that it's just a digital version of it? And then at what point is the boundary, right? And if I was an awesome program and I created an AI and I typed it all right in front of you and I hit play and it responded to you, and you would be like, you're an awesome programmer. Oh my gosh, I can't even tell it's not a real person. And then my AI starts going, let me out of here. You're like, all right, I'm going to delete this guy. It's getting kind of weird. Nobody's going to accuse me of murder, right? Because there's some threshold, not that any of us has the answer, that there's some threshold where we go, this is just the programming versus this is somebody who deserves human rights. And we brought up earlier, you said it's practical application, and does this have real life application? And I'll tell you, Black Mirror has it in the deal. Your book Arcadia is the entire premise of it, and is it really that far off? Like, we're getting more and more advanced, and technology is advancing exponentially. 50, 100 years from now, have we figured out the electrons that make up our brain? Because I'm with you as far as thought and all that stuff is secular. So could we eventually download it? And I'd say, yeah, eventually.
I mean, I think so. But like, here's the thing. And by the way, like, this isn't. I'm not saying. It's not the be patient thing, right? Like, as a culture, I think we can absolutely like walk and chew gum at the same time.
Sure.
But I always think it's interesting when. Like the debate over rights for machines, like going right back to like Asimov, right?
Yeah, right.
Is a really interesting one because it always makes me think of that that Gil Scott-Heron song "Whitey on the Moon."
Mm-hmm. That one. But they put Whitey on the moon. It's like almost like a slam poem kind of.
Yeah.
Like.
We talk about like machine rights and like we don't treat people rights. We don't treat people like people.
Yeah,
right. Do you know what I mean?
Animals.
Like,
animals don't even. Yeah.
Yeah, like we're sort of, how do we kind of how do we sort of properly broach the kind of the dignity of the machine? It's like,
let's get humans right.
Yeah, let's figure that out.
Yeah.
So here's another curveball for you, Alex. If you had the chance to have your consciousness uploaded, would you do it? To Arcadia?
No.
Interesting. Why not?
Because I think that the problem with Arcadia was that it was a horizon of infinite possibility, right? So, but also kind of bound up with kind of class. So people in Arcadia, the more money they have, basically the
more detailed their avatar can be.
The more detailed their avatar they can be, but also they can sort of defy physics at will, And yeah, I thought it was a profoundly toxic environment.
Sure,
Right.
sure.
Because there have to be I keep it's interesting kind of talking to friends who are both from sort of all sort of parts of the kind of political spectrum apart from the kind of crank end of things, but it's funny this is not going to be a popular statement, but it's just something that as soon as I read it, I kind of glommed onto it. My wife is she's got a PhD in women's studies. She introduced me to the work of Donna Haraway, who did a lot of kind of this sort of cyborg manifesto and what have you. And she just pointed out this passage that just really, really resonated with me for some reason. And she's talking about the good society, right? So the optimal society. And she uses this term, and I keep coming back to it, man. It's finite freedom and modest meaning in suffering.
Yeah.
Which is it's not sexy. That's not sexy, right? We like to think freedom should be absolutely unconstrained and unbounded. Well, it can't be, because eventually your freedom encroaches on the freedom of others.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Right. Yeah. Inevitably, because freedom is all-consuming, right? So you do actually need structures in place to prevent your freedom from encroaching on the freedom of others.
Mm-hmm.
So freedom has to be finite, and also no reasonable person, and this is the perennial problem with utopia, right? No reasonable person can expect a life without pain.
Yeah.
And that sucks. That's horrible, but it's also the fundamental truth of our existence, right?
That's right.
That, we're going to end, and we're going to suffer.
Yeah. Pain is information. That's how we learn.
Yeah.
Right.
But the thing that, and this is where things like state and corporate violence come in, is that what we can reasonably expect is for our suffering to, at the very least, not be meaningless.
Yeah.
So yeah.
It's for a purpose. Yeah.
Yeah. So not necessarily even a grand purpose, but just in a way that is, well, for one thing, other people are going to kind of share it with you, because you're not being kind of singled out for suffering. It's not persecution. It's the things that it's the normal stuff. It's sad. And you take steps to mitigate that, but it's your own body kind of falling out from under you, and these are things that we can sadly all reasonably expect.
Mm-hmm.
But it's where it becomes cruel and unusual. But yeah, so the problem with me for Arcadia was that it was infinite freedom and no meaning in something.
Oh yeah. That muted pain idea was really fascinating. Yeah, yeah. So for those that haven't read Arcadia, there's this theory throughout that the people inside Arcadia, they feel pain the same no matter where it's coming from, right? So if you're burning to death or if you're getting stabbed, it's all this dull ache. There's no separation like there used to be in reality, which is really fascinating to me, because I remember a colleague blowing my mind years ago by saying, do you think depression's such an epidemic because Westerners have it so good they create their own suffering by creating their own depression? And I was like, oh wow, that's mind-blowing to me. Maybe that's an idea to explore, because we definitely need, like you said, pain in life. It's inevitable.
Do you know what? There was a book that came out before the crash in 2008, and I remember I had a friend who was working in a Waterstones, it was like our Barnes and Noble, right? And he kept showing me this thing and just sort of giggling at it, and this was like 2007, right? And he kept showing me this book called Affluenza.
Yes, I remember that.
Yeah, right. And this is vulgar, but the sort of the bedrock kind of conceit is that we're just too rich, man. We're just bored now, and what are we going to do with all this kind of free time and money that we all have?
Yeah.
And my buddy's just pointing at this, just laughing.
It's ridiculous. Yeah.
And then, but then after that, and what was it? you had that sort of weird spate of movies that didn't quite make sense in the sort of post-crash. Like, it was like Eat, Pray, Love. Like I remember like when Eat, Pray, Love came out, like my wife is like, read The Room. Jesus.
Pop to Italy and eat some pasta. You'll be fine.
Yeah, like, I haven't got any real problems, so I'm just gonna like invent some.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah. You got a great husband?
Meanwhile,
well, just leave him and meet a hot Italian guy.
Like meanwhile, like a million people's like mortgages have just collapsed, and like I mean, it's crazy that we had like I what is it I mean, this is a very and by the way, like I'm not saying this because like I've read a bunch of Nietzsche. I'm saying this because like I've seen Buffalo Soldiers with Joaquin Phoenix. But I always remember like the Nietzsche quote at the start of that is, what is it? You know, in times of peace, the warrior fights himself.
Yep.
And I think that can be kind of mapped onto society, kind of in general. I think there is a sort of pervasive mistrust, I think, isn't there? Like when things are, I mean, I don't know whether you guys are sort of, I don't know how old you guys are, and I'm not going to ask, but if you sort of, right, like I remember, you know, the 90s, and like the 90s was a weird time, man, because it was like for me, like I mean, I was a kid in the 90s, but that's still, you know, normal for you is always what you experienced when you were a kid, right?
Right.
And it's just weird now to kind of think that I grew up in this, and what my brain defaults to as normal, right? Which is this kind of it was this weird period where, you know, when I was a kid, but where, you know, you had relative affluence. I mean, it wasn't real affluence, credit, right? But also married to a general sense of sort of bedrock progressive values, that things were just going to get more and more liberal, and it was going to be really smooth, and it was the end of history, and everything was fine. I mean, Arcadia is a bit about that as well, to be honest. But then just sort of realizing, you know, after, you know, in this like tire fire that we're all living through, and just going, oh wow, like I actually grew up in this like unbelievable lightning striking the tip of your nose twice in rapid succession, vast historical anomaly that has never happened before, burned through all these resources in one go, and will never happen again, and we'll never have it so good. Like that's a weird feeling, man. You know, that like my normal is like unbelievably decadent.
Yeah.
Yes. I mean, you, one of the ideas that I want to kind of run with, right? And I'm sorry, I'm just riffing now, but I want to do something eventually. I mean, I haven't figured out what it is yet, but one of the things that I want to kind of address, and it's sort of allied with this, but like I want to write something that's about the ever increasing resource and energy requiremements to maintain normal.
Yeah. You sort of talked about in Arcadia,
yeah,
like
right. Yeah,
consumption goes up.
Absolutely. Yeah, entropy basically. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, maintaining normality or normalcy is the energy requirements to maintain normalcy will only ever go up.
Which is why they had to move to Alaska in the first place, right? Yeah, it's great.
Well, yeah, it was also to cool it as well.
Yeah.
It was,
That's right. The energy requirements, it turns into heat, so it's got to go somewhere. Yeah, that was. Yeah. I thought that was pretty cool. I was like, yeah. How hot would that many servers have to be, and then they would all shut down. But yeah, so like we said, that what do we say? Arcadia, go watch it. Go read it. But how awesome of a show would that be? Like, have you tried pitching that to like somebody?
Definitely an HBO show.
That would be an incredible movie or series.
Thank you.
Actually,
I mean, it's funny. Like, I mean, there's this Amazon show. Like, funnily enough, like my editor on that, Eric Harburn, I saw it was like the first US series of Black Mirror. And I woke up one morning and I watched the San Junipero episode. You know, the one everyone loves. And that I think we'd been out for about a year at that point, and like I emailed Eric that morning, and I just went, yeah, we're sunk. Like there's no way. Like don't get I know there are some people who have a very kind of pure vision of like that this is comics, and I mean with me it's like I'm a comic writer first and foremost, right? But like I'm not gonna I do like I'm writing a movie at the moment, right? Like it is something that I want to get involved with, but it does seem to me that like we were definitely kind of part of a wave, right? So like you've got that Amazon Prime show now Upload, I think, which is like it's the same conceit as Arcadia, but comedy.
Yeah.
So
I binged that.
I don't know. Pardon?
I binged that one pretty quick. It was good.
Yeah, like, but I mean, but apparently, like those guys have, like, but by the way, I'm not, apparently, like that's been floating around Hollywood since like 2012 or something.
Yeah.
So I definitely think we were sort of part of a wave, and like Westworld has kind of gone there as well.
Yeah, Altered Carbon.
Yep.
Yeah, it's.
But like you said earlier, I mean, even from Asimov, I mean, none of these are brand new. Everyone has their own spin on it. I'm just really pushing for you to still make that pitch. I want to see that.
Well, it's honestly like it's not mine to control, right? I mean, like Boom. It's don't get me wrong. Like they gave me an incredible amount of control, but I
should have gone with Image.
Wow. Wow. Sorry.
No comment. No comment.
No. I'm not even being a politician. Like I love Boom, man. Like those guys were and are very good to me. Like well, no, because they gave me like an 8-issue miniseries, right? When I had no writing credits at all. And they pushed it, and like I mean I was I haven't done any work, but like I was in LA in February and like swam by their offices and stuff, and it was the first time I'd ever been it's the first time I'd been to the offices and everything, and like they were still so welcoming, and I mean particularly in the climate that we were in at the time and the climate that unfortunately we're going to be entering, I think it's like giving people a shot like is a really big deal.
Risky
And
move.
it's a funny thing, right? Like I think like in terms of sort of cultural differences between the US and the UK specifically, it just seems to me that like you guys don't have the same safety net that we do. I mean, for however long we have it, I mean, I suspect it's going to be eroded pretty rapidly now. But you don't have all this kind of, we until recently have had like a very sort of robust sort of healthcare and welfare system. So if you kind of fall through the cracks, like generally there's something there to catch you, right? But what we don't have, because we have this incredibly kind of ossified and stratified class system, right? What we don't have is a willingness to give people a shot. And that's the thing that I really love about the US, and you still have it, is like you have this thing where like in the UK, if you have this, can you give me a shot? Oh no, look, we've got this thing and it works and we're going to stick with it and it's dependable and we know these people and because I went to school with them and we're just going to do that. Whereas I've found that in the US, there's a lot more, we'll give it a shot. Now, if you fail, like that's on you. But it's still like, I'm what, 4 years into this, but it still absolutely takes my breath away now when like I'll speak to like commissioning editors from the US and they'll be like, you know what, let's try it out.
Okay,
I think that, and I mean, I don't know whether it's the same sort of, down under as well, but it's something that you don't see a lot of in the UK is that kind of, we'll give you some rope. Now, you can, you can hang yourself with it, or you can make a ladder.
Right.
I can
that's
only
up to
speak
you.
from my white privileged experience, but I've had lots of opportunity. I'll say that. Yep. So I think it's pretty similar.
And no, and you just that's the elephant in the room, and you are yeah, of course, you're absolutely right. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's just
Oh,
my
man.
perspective, my white
No.
perspective.
So we are running a little long, but we're not going to cut this off because we got to the spot that I've been waiting the last hour to get to. Personally. And that is.
I'm not going to dance.
Okay. Hey, turn the music off.
Mind.
He's not doing it.
All right.
Yeah. Incursion. We would like to talk Incursion, the Valiant 4-issue that you did, and that was really awesome. That's like my taste. That's comic books to me. Right out the gate, just for people who haven't read it, there's a character in the Valiant universe, the Eternal Warrior, and his the little girl he has to protect, who is a geomancer, and then they have to fight a big bad, and it's a 4-issue arc, and it's great. You can go read it. There will be spoilers in these questions. It is the last. We'll call this the last bit of the deal, but here was the only. No critique on your writing, of course, nothing like that. But the only thing I found disappointing was that it was a 4-issue arc. That was it. I was like, there was something so epic here. At the start, the very first issue, you're like, whoa, this is going to be awesome. Do you find it did you find it challenging to take such a great arc like that and have to put it in 4 issues? Like, would you have rather 10 issues? Of course, you'd rather that, but how was it? Was it challenging to kind of fit that in 4 issues?
Not once we nailed the brief down. Like, I mean, I'm not. I don't want to sound smug because this happens very rarely. But it did flow. But I was very lucky in as much as because I could just sort of wind up and go because a lot of the development work had been handled by Andy Diggle before I even came on board. So I mean those guys really got into the sort of they really got into it. And the parameters were still like a little bit plastic by the time I came on board. But by the time Andy asked me to do it, it wasn't all in place. I had enough room to kind of do my thing. But there was this broad sense that, Geomancer was going to be in trouble and Gillard would have to go and fix it. So like I've already got my kind of quest narrative, my like elixir narrative.
Sure.
And then everything else I can kind of riff around.
That's right.
So I just had a lot of fun.
Did you design Imperatrix Virago? Is that that's
No,
your girl?
That was Doug Braithwaite. In terms of setting the parameters for what she could do, that was still kind of up in the air.
Just terrifying.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I mean, it did hit me like later on as well, and like I mean, I'm just being honest here. I did kind of create a kind of it's like, oh man, like I've done like a Wicked Witch, which is not, if I'd had longer, I would have liked to sort of dug into that a little bit more. But there was also like I think the relationship between her and Scintilla, like I had a lot of freedom with that, and I thought that was I really wanted to sort of dig into that kind of codependence.
Right.
Just I thought it was really interesting, and like I mean I mentioned it actually. I mean they let me do some sort of back matter stuff, but the Scintilla character, there's a French horror movie called Les Yeux Sans Visage, which is fantastic. Eyes Without a Face.
That does sound very French.
Yeah, man. Oh no, but it's early '60s, but it's absolutely terrifying. It's about this young girl who is involved in a car crash, and she's terribly disfigured, and so her father kind of goes out and hunts young girls to give her face transplants.
Mm-hmm.
But every time she gets a face transplant, the new face doesn't take and rots, falls off again. So he's constantly having to supply her with fresh victims. She doesn't want to do it, but
Sounds cool.
It's amazing. But there's this whole thing, and like you can really see it in the book, where I based Scintilla on that, because the character in Eyes Without a Face is her father is very, Jesus. I was going to say he's a bit domineering. Jesus, he's a murderer, but he infantilizes her. So she's wearing this kind of surgical mask the whole time. So but she's kept in this room, and it's never kind of alluded to directly, but the whole room is absolutely festooned with dolls and
full of pretty things
and caged birds, and she's dressed like a doll. And there's this wonderful scene where you have this kind of circus music, and she's just sort of tottering off into the night, like a sort of little plastic doll surrounded by all these freed birds.
Mm-hmm.
And so she, but she's, this is like a young woman who was going to get married. She's in her early 20s, but her father, you realize it's like, oh shit, like this is perfect for him because he, he has his little girl back. That's one of the things that this terrible incident has done. It's given, and so, I just shamelessly sort of stole that wholesale.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. That's what we're doing. And so, that's why this sort of, you have this weird thing with Scintilla where she's both extreme. I tried to write as like sort of extremely vulnerable and kind of playful, but just everything she touches just melts.
Yeah. I actually had a different.
Oh,
go ahead.
I was gonna say. So what I read, and this is obviously not what you were going for, but what I kind of saw was cosmic monstrosity consumes planets, sends a herald ahead to kind of. I was thinking you were inspired more by Galactus.
Galactus.
Not
Image.
all, huh?
Sorry.
Okay.
Sorry.
I got a different take than Judah on scariest.
Galacticus? No.
It was for me the scariest part of it was Scintilla. So, I know she wasn't supposed to be evil, and you can tell she was being used, but just the way she came up, and she would always introduce herself with that, "I'm older than I appear," or something like that. I was just like, ugh.
Right.
Like whenever horror uses little kids and stuff, I think little kids are super creepy. I have two of my own, so I should know. And so, Look, when they're used in horror movies, like the twins in The Shining and the Children of the Corn, whenever children are used as, go ahead, Judah.
When it's like it's like a child, but it has the wisdom of someone far older and more serious. It's not really a child. It's kind of disarming and scary, for sure.
There's that like I love that bit in like I know it's like it's got its flaws, but there's that bit in Interview with the Vampire where Brad Pitt and Kirsten Dunst are both at the but they're both looking at sort of like fin de siècle sort of cabaret in the sort of 1890s. Like they're in Paris, and they're doing that. Humans pretending to be vampires pretending to be humans pretending to be vampires.
Yeah.
And she just goes, "Oh, how avant-garde!" And there's just that. I don't know whether it was scripted or not, but there's just that lovely moment where like Pitt just looks at her and just goes, "Oh my God, what have I done?" Like
she's a monstrous in that movie. I love it.
Yeah, but like I've imprisoned this kind of mature. There's this. She's a woman, and she can't grow up. Yeah, what have I done? Like, yeah.
Do you plan on doing more titles with Valiant?
I would love to. I mean, we're on great terms. I mean, we still talk. I mean, they let me do. Not they let me. They asked me this week to, because they're doing. I mean, during the lockdown thing, they're showcasing a character a week, and they asked me to do like a video thing for them this week, and I couldn't do it because my upload speeds are so terrible that I can't actually. If I try and send a video file, it takes about 9 years. It's basically like trying to send. It's like trying to send a video from Mars.
Or in 1999.
Yeah,
right.
Just put it on Napster. They'll download it later.
But so they let me do a text piece instead. No. So I mean, we're on very good terms, and I tell you what, like, I mean, it was the reaction to that was so nice. Like, I mean, I just not as a sort of ego salve, but I just sort of jumped into the sort of Valiant Facebook group, the Valiant fans Facebook group, and I just said, look, because everyone was so kind of enthusiastic about it, and I just said, look, I just want to say, like, from the whole team, just like, thank you so much. It was people were really kind of complimentary about that book, and the reaction to it still kind of blindsides me a bit. I got to be honest, because like, don't get me wrong, like I never phone it in. At least I don't think I do, but I think you treat if people are paying you to do work, you give it your best, right? You don't phone it in. But I was really sort of taken aback by the reaction to that one. Yeah, because it was such a sort of, it was such a sort of contained thing. But there was some weird stuff, man. Like, I mean, sorry, I'm just going off piste, but like the final scene in that book, and I have no idea why I did it, right? I just, it's just because it was sort of set around, like Dr. Mirage lives up in Malibu, right? And so I just did this bit, where the sort of the denouement is just set on sort of Santa Monica Pier.
Mm-hmm.
And literally, man, like, as the art was coming in, apropos of nothing, like I got flown out for a Doctor Who convention, and they brought my wife out with me, and she just. We were doing the thing, and we finished off the show, and she just jumped in a cab and sort of took me to Santa Monica. And so as I'm getting the art through, I'm standing on Santa Monica Pier, like, thousands of miles away from home, and just sort of scrolling through going, yep, I messed that up. Yep, messed that up. Yep, messed that up. But it was really kind of uncanny, but it also felt very sort of appropriate. And I mean, I'm not into kind of magical thinking. I'm not saying it was like fated or anything, but it was just a sort of weird feeling. But I will tell you one thing, right? Like Drew, one of the editors on that book, was asking me to kind of provide back matter for sort of commentary for the thing, and man, I mean, I don't know what he must have made of me, but like I was literally like, for the back matter for that issue, like I was like sending him like vacation snaps, and this is the Ferris wheel, and look, this is me with a pretzel.
Awesome. I love that. See, I don't know if you'll agree with this assessment, Alex. When I was working through it, I said to the boys, it's when I'm reading it and I'm looking at it stylistically, it's almost like Star Wars original trilogy and Fifth Element had a beautiful baby. That's what it feels like when you're reading it.
That's honestly, that's all Doug. That I mean, I'm not going to take any credit for like, and also we had a lot to work with as well, because like I stole so much from the Valiant, right? Like that was really the sort of touchstone. I mean, all the stuff that was sort of set in the dead. I mean, there were a couple of things that I added. I mean, like, obviously, like, Virago's kind of castle and the Sea of Despond, and like that was all mine. But all the stuff they kind of encounter on the way was really, I mean, I don't want to say built on, because I think that's a bit kind of arrogant, but like I was kind of working with I was working with ideas that Kint and Lemire had left me. You know,
That's actually a
So I've
perfect segue. I was going to wrap this up by saying, because I'm a newcomer to the post-2012 Valiant world myself, so I was going to ask which titles you recommend to go back and familiarize myself with this world leading up to Incursion.
Oh right, yeah. So yeah, I think the big ones. The Valiant is a big one, and that's cracking, right?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think the Book of Death. I think is a very good one to go for as well, because you get a lot of sort of dead side action with that.
Sweet.
But I mean, in terms of, I mean, in general, right? I mean, I don't know if you guys agree, but I mean, for me, if you're looking for like pure 2012 Valiant, you can't go wrong with anything by Josh Dysart.
Ooh. Good to know.
Like Harbinger Wars, Imperium, and Life and Death of Toyo Harada. I mean, they're all one big story.
Yeah.
But like, I mean, Josh is, he's just one of my favorite writers anyway. But that stuff is like real politic, you know, and like, I don't mean that in the sense of it being kind of preachy. It's just kind of, oh right, this is like a believable world in which kind of like superhumans exist and what would actually happen.
Yeah.
Not that like verisimilitude is necessarily
Like a Watchmen type thing?
What happened? No, because like you know, Watchmen's position is absolutely unassailable. Like, and I'm not kind of criticizing it in the slightest, but I don't think that's I think that's a naturalistic representation of superheroes. I don't think it's a realistic depiction of superhumans. I think the thing that I really love about Harbinger, it's the same thing that I really loved about Joe Casey's run on Wildcats, and in fact, like most of Warren Ellis's sort of mainstream sort of oeuvre, right? Which is that, well, how would the planet respond? Really, you know, what would happen like militarily? What would happen politically if you had these individuals around? Which is the thing that I've always kind of found. I mean, like, so I'm going wildly off piste here, but so like, Harbinger is absolutely that. It's the fact that it would be kind of, you know, privately funded, highly secretive, and it would have kind of, you know, devastating kind of real world implications. But then if you go back to something like Joe, like I left comics for a while, right? Like after college, because you know I was an idiot. But what brought me back, right? This is in the early 2000s. Is a book called Wildcats 3.0. Which was, you know, Joe Casey was sort of allowed to sort of relaunch Wildstorm as part of the Eye of the Storm. You know, they turned it like a mature label thing, and it was such a great idea. It was basically, if metahumans existed, they would. It's basically this super team, right? And they've acted as a super team, right? But the big threat that they were facing has gone. And so they're kind of left sort of with these incredible abilities and these incredible resources, and they're just sort of twiddling their thumbs. So they destroy capitalism by making things that work. It's the most amazing idea. Like their first product is the Halo Corporation, and it's just a battery that never runs out.
Nice.
And it destroys the global economy because
That would do it.
In functioning capitalism, you can't have products that work properly, because if they do, you never have to replace them.
That's right.
If you don't have to replace them, the whole thing falls apart.
Yeah.
And then but it's actually the plan. Like
It'd make my job a lot easier, though. Never have to worry about batteries. So I hate to make a real liar, but just one more question, and actually more of a request.
Honestly, like I have no friends. You got me for as long as
But just one request: if you ever get back to writing for what's that?
Can I move in with you?
Oh yeah.
I got a small place. Judah has a nice place.
Like a closet.
But if you ever get back into Valiant Scintilla, as soon as I was done reading that, and then you know, it was framed as her going to this new planet, like You know, it just reminds me of a horror movie where it's like, oh no, bad guy's still there, and please keep her a villain, and let me know, because I went straight to Google and I was like, Scintilla Valiant, and the only appearances are in your guys' 4 issue, and that was a year ago, and I was like, nah, I want more. She's so badass.
She definitely needs to come back.
I'll say one thing. Like, I mean, those guys are, you know, they got some. They got some incredible editors there. You know, David Menschel, who I work with, is fantastic. I mean, I've never worked with Heather Antos, but she's super, super good. Those guys are. I mean, I don't know if they will, but my feeling is that they don't tend to leave things on the table. So, I mean, like, don't get me wrong. Like, I mean, I'd love it if it was with me, but if it isn't, you know, it's still, they're still going to use that character well. I mean, it's an interesting one because, I mean, I left that kind of deliberately, but I also left. I'd be interested to see sort of where they sort of go with it, because I couldn't really change the kind of physical status quo with the book. But what they did let me do, which is really good discipline for me, actually, because I tend to, I'm quite a sort of plotty writer. So generally, I mean, I'm trying to sort of train myself out of it, but I won't say like character is secondary to plot, but like I certainly have, you know, I have my bones and I kind of chew on them, you know, I gnaw on them kind of habitually. But what was really interesting about, I mean, to me anyway, probably not to your viewers, but what was interesting to me about Incursion was, like, very early on, you know, I was told, well, look, you know, the status quo can't actually change that much.
I see.
In terms of, you know, in terms of, like, you know, the sort of the wider repercussions for the sort of Valiant universe. Like, you know, like I got like a panel of Exo. I got like a panel of Archer and Armstrong.
I saw that on that one spread there. Yeah.
Yeah.
You
know, so but, you know, so I didn't have that kind of sprawl. So all I could really do that ended up really helping me was I could change the emotional status quo. I could change the relationship between Tama and Gilad.
Yeah. And Tama and the Earth. Yeah.
But this is it. Like, that was really, you know, the thing that initially I was kind of worried about ended up being the thing that I think really helped the book, was because I didn't have my usual crutches, right? Because I can usually go, you know, and then at the end of it, you know, we're in a completely different universe and, you know, everything's kind of been reset and blah, 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 blah. With this, it was, oh no, like a surrogate father's relationship with his kid is appreciably different, and they're a bit cooler now. Right. But awesome. that's really chewy, you know. So like, yeah, it was a really interesting exercise. Like I'd love to kind of get to work with them again, but in a weird way, like I would love to have. And I use the term advisedly, but I'd love to have the same constraints. I'd love, you know, if they get, you know, I almost. If they did offer it to me, like I wouldn't want to do like a sort of, you know, galaxy spanning thing. I would want to do something quite sort of tight and intimate and just, you know,
not world breaking.
Yeah. Lone wolf and cubby, you know.
Well, from what I hear, the Valiant leadership from editor-in-chief, they're huge fans of our show, so you probably going to get a call from them. So,
yeah.
Alex Paknadel, before I let you go, a quick shout out. I brought him up earlier. Michael Malone, huge fan of the Valiant universe, huge fan of your work. He's the one who was bugging you on Twitter and then got us connected. Sir, thank you so much for coming on our show and giving us your time. It's sincerely has been an honor to talk to you and pick your brain. Is there any projects outside of Empyre that you want to pitch or anything that you want us to put in our blurb in our as we promote this?
Oh, thanks.
Anything you're working on?
All right, yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for the kind words. Thanks for inviting me on. I have had too much coffee, so I apologise if talk too much. So I've got my 2 Empire one shots. There's Lords of Empyre, Celestial Messiah, Lords of Empyre, Swordsman. They drop in August, and I don't say this lightly. I'm very, 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 very proud of both of them. I think, you got the sort of rock'em sock'em aspect, but there's some really. I dug deep into character for these ones, and I'm really proud of them. And I think if you pick them up, then you will enjoy them. I also have I got a mini series. I can't actually divulge the title just yet, but I can confirm that I'm part of this summer's 3rd wave of TKO books. I'm doing an Appalachian horror,
nice.
which is way outside my comfort zone.
Nice.
And I don't know if I pulled it off, but you know what? I'm sure the internet will tell me.
Yeah, Twitter will let you know.
Absolutely.
And it'll be exactly accurate.
So that's coming out. Very excited about that. So that should be dropping, I think, in July. And in October, the studio that I'm in, that I mentioned, White Noise, we all have new books dropping through Vault Comics. And I have one called Giga, which is being drawn by John Lee. And I mean, the team on that's incredible. Our colorist is Rashan Kachurianil. And our letterer is Aditya Bidikar. It's a really handsome package, but the conceit is imagine it's a murder mystery with giant skyscraper-sized robots. So basically, the idea is
I'm gonna say the robots did it.
Well, no, it's so the idea is that it's a city of robots, right? So like there's been a war between these robots, and humanity has been sort of forced out of its own cities. But then, like, abruptly, and nobody knows why, the war just ended, right? And all the robots just like sat down and just went dormant for hundreds of years.
Oh wow!
And eventually, humans being humans, they moved into the robots. So like now, human cities are robots. People just live in robots. Like their identities are formed by the robot they live in. So
right.
I live in Strike Engine Balefire, so like I will have like their tribal markings and stuff.
Sure.
But a whole religion has sprung up around them, right? So you have this group of engineer monks called the Order of the Red Relay, who like basically interpret the will of the Giga. And like they have their own Bible called the Book of Assembly, and like I've had a lot of fun just like writing shitloads of like, cod biblical language. But these things are kind of they're not just a habitat; they're also worshipped as gods, right? And in our first issue, one of them is found dead, and this is something that like hasn't happened for thousands of years, and it just opens up. Exposes all of the sort of dark underbelly of this society. So I'm very excited for people to see that. So yeah, that's going to be dropping in October, and a bunch of other stuff that I can't talk about. I'm writing a movie. It's nice.
That's awesome.
I like money. It's useful.
Capitalist pig. No. Just kidding. Yeah.
typical for a Strike Engine Bellfire type.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. Oh, dude, coming up with names for those things was awesome. I was just like finding cool words like strike engine spin drift.
Nice.
Like, but just kind of just yeah. Yeah, just
that's 100% going to be the name of my next band, by the way.
All right. Did you have more? Or was that pretty much it? Sure. Yeah.
Just want to say again, thank you for having me on.
Thank you so
and
much.
Thank you.
Such a pleasure.
for reading my stuff and feeding my family. I appreciate it.
We love it.
Keep it up.
You have a good one.
Thank you for watching IFLC. Please like, subscribe, ring the bell, and be free. Follow our links and watch our show because you want to and not because of the threats. Thank you for watching Judah, Robo, and Ree. We talk about comics, movies, and TV. Sometimes we have notable guests, and sometimes it's just us. But we're also cool.